So first of all, welcome to the coldest South by anybody's ever been to. It's very chilly at the South by.
It was chilly last year as well.
What? No, it was not.
It was freezing last year.
Was it?
For those of,
Okay, well.
but,
Memories are always short at South by.
yeah, exactly.
Well, hey, how are we doing? Is everybody okay? I mean, like fruit, juice, need to like get a little break? We okay? Well, nice to meet y'all. I'm Paul, as you so eloquently introduced us. So we're chatting about immersive storytelling content, and we have Val here on the sort of mass distribution out of home.
Yes.
You want to talk a bit about your role?
Yeah. So I'm VP of Brand Partnerships at OUTFRONT Media. We are one of the largest North American out-of-home companies. So think billboards and walls and Times Square digital spectaculars and New York City subway advertising. So we're kind of everywhere. We're like woven into all of your towns, and we're there to tell brand stories for you. So
Awesome. Bill, how about you?
Yeah, thanks everybody. So I'm at Tremor International. I came there by way of an Amobi acquisition 6 months ago, and so I grew up and live in the digital programmatic space. And with Tremor, we can bring together really interesting programmatic capabilities, but then also like on the supply side. So anywhere that you can run a digital ad, we can place it for you. And so in my role, I work with a lot of our performance brands to help them scale up what they're trying to do in programmatic, trying to figure out how to, whatever their KPIs are, we have a solution for that. So it's really exciting and interesting, and yeah, I'm looking forward to do this little shakedown with you guys.
All right, great.
I think you should introduce what you had a really big, couple weeks ago.
Yeah, sure. So I came from Cabbage. It was a fintech company based out of Atlanta. We got acquired by American Express in 2020. And American Express, it was this pretty big bet on a small, scrappy fintech, especially they just got pummeled during COVID. And they said, hey, we want you to become the new face of how we show up for small businesses beyond the card. If you're not getting a card from us, we offer bank accounts, we offer small business loans, we offer payment processing, other digital cash flow tools for small businesses, free cash flow analytics. And they said, we want you to come and change the face of how we show up for businesses in the US. And so the past couple of years, me and my team have been building out what that looks like. We just launched a few weeks ago, and so Business Blueprint is the new name for American Express's digital suite of cash flow tools for small businesses, and that's serving from the smallest. They can come in and get a free tool from us to manage their cash flow, understand their money in and out a bit more, and then beyond that too. So I'm very much in this space right now where I've just launched this thing, and I'm looking to think about how am I going to go and drive awareness? How am I going to think about telling a broader story that is. Everybody perceives Amex as a card company. Very few even know they have business cards, let alone credit cards. And so how do I change the perception and the belief of a nation of small businesses that we also offer cash flow tools? That's a very unique challenge that I and my team are facing. So this is great. So
Congratulations.
Thanks, I appreciate that. That's very kind. Okay, so immersive storytelling, that can go lots of directions, right? You can go one piece of content that goes very deep, really rich. It can go, you can have VR and other devices. But first of all, show of hands, who has bought something on a social platform? Did TikTok ever make you buy it? Okay, all right. How many of you, of those hands, you saw that product that day and you never thought of that product and you bought it that moment? It was an impulse buy. Okay. Pretty similar hands. Okay. So in that context, I think there's certainly what's happening on the consumer journey cycle from, you have to drive awareness, you have to nurture that lead, you have to have more consideration and to eventually have that purchase. We are seeing it actively happening that purchase cycle is collapsed. People are buying in the moment, and so that raises a question. If you think about immersive storytelling, does it have a fighting chance, with this new behavior of consumers buying whatever they see whenever they see it? Do you need to invest so heavily in a large out-of-home campaign with billboards and take over the New York subway? Do I need to have a several month-long strategy where I'm targeting people with various video ads on connected devices and things like this? So talk to me a little bit about that. I'm curious of your take on that.
I mean, I don't own a business, but I would imagine relying heavily on individuals just impulse buying your product is not a very good business plan long term. So, it always goes back to brand and being able to tell that brand story. So I think the challenge that brands face is how do you show up in meaningful ways and really I go back to the Jack in the Box Jack in the Box panel that Rachel moderated yesterday, and Jack in the Box, like, they just know their voice. I mean, they actually have a somewhat human brand person that is the voice of their brand, and it's just so clear, and they don't veer from it. They know exactly what they are, and every brand should have that be their ultimate goal, is to, like, you know, like you've seen like this wave of, like, we need purpose, like, embedded into like every message that we have, but a lot of those have felt like super unauthentic. Yeah, that's a word, right? Yeah, thank you. And so I think I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think heavily brand is so important to be woven into every part of the process of reaching your consumer.
Mm-hmm. Bill, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think about the consumer journey every day. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but for where we sit in our ecosystem, sometimes we're running that all the way from a campaign from start to finish. Sometimes we get hired on to help to support an activation, but I'm always asking and thinking about where is the consumer at the time that you're having this brand, and I think there is the balance. I think you bring up a good point. There is easy money to be made by brands if they want to get out there and they want to run campaigns and they want to just run promotions, run sales, run giveaways, whatever they may be, to be able to drive action very immediately. But what does that do to the long-term brand equity? And how do you end up thinking about that? And I think the brands that we hear about today are all about mission-driven purpose here. And I mean, even the American Express with small business, right? You could probably get a lot of small businesses to sign up really quickly by running TikTok ads, but if you're not, is that the right thing you want to do for your brand? Is that the right way that you want to be out there versus creating awareness, creating what does that brand mean to people? And I think that's the interesting piece of, like, when you say collapse of the consumer journey, I just think it's just sped up, and it speeds up and slows down in such different ways that as marketers, we have to understand where we're catching, where are we hitting people in the moment, and there's a right time and a wrong time to be in front of them. And I think that's where, like, programmatic and what we do is really important.
Yeah, you know, I think the channel mix will always be there. But, you know, I'm even curious on your end, Val, is, like, at what point does the juice run dry for the brand's value of that? And, like, have you seen, like, any sort of, like, diminishment on the out-of-home because digital has become so prevalent and pervasive in the buying cycle?
It's interesting. With out-of-home, we've had, like, 2019, let's exclude COVID, those 2 COVID years, and last year have been like our 2 shelter in place for out-of-home companies is not a good situation. But no, so 2019 and 2022 have been our best years to date, and I think there's a lot of interesting reasons why. Obviously, the environment is really shifting, and brands are trying to figure out where to be. And I think that technology has evolved quite a bit with out-of-home, where we can understand from a targeting, you know, standpoint, like, where individuals are on an aggregate level in a much more detailed manner than we ever have before using, you know, cellular data. And then even on the back end, from a measurement perspective, we're finally, like, even ComScore came out with a study, like, comparing, like, TV and digital video and out-of-home and print and radio and probably a few other channels. And out-of-home was, like, indexing higher than TV in many scenarios, and kind of neck and neck with digital video as far as, like, driving all these secondary actions. So for so long, we just never got the credit for sort of some of these, like, really important optimizations of other media channels. So anyway, so again, like, point being, I think it's brands, unfortunately, like, with out-of-home, they kind of think of it as an other, and I'm sure there's many other, you know, publishers out here who are kind of regarded as an other, and, you know, with brands, and I think, how do we get brands to be a lot more nimble about their approach to thinking about through different channels and channel clusters, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, which I think is really interesting.
You're getting ahead, Val.
Oh,
you're getting ahead.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. All right, sorry.
But I like that. But it's a good thing, right? We talk about, if we're doing the reverse panel, right? This is our chance to kind of, like, talk about what we see in the challenges. But I think we all, as vendors, sometimes feel like the other, right? So how do we end up becoming? You know, we understand. My company doesn't run out of a home, but we might work on a similar brand.
Shame on you.
Yeah, I got to figure it. I mean, when those billboards get digital enough and big enough, we'll be able to do it. But, you know, how do we not become the other? How do we start to become more integrated with the brand? And I think on our side, we're only as good as what we're let in from the marketers, and what are they trying to do? What is their mission? What are they trying to accomplish with their consumers? Especially for these things that are not so, like, in the moment, but they're a longer term play. And I think that's the place where I feel as brands and as this convergence happens in the space, is being able to tap into all these others, but in a singular way to be able to tie those strategies together. And I think that's where I get really excited. Again, customer journey and thinking about that, they all fit together if done well.
Yeah. So let's get into that. So again, immersive storytelling can mean lots of things. One thing, they go deep and rich. It can mean experiential. It can mean you're having lots of channels and you're telling the same story in lots of places and to a very targeted audience. So what have you guys seen that brands have done or haven't done that have worked when it comes to that sort of that channel mix? Do you guys get the insight? Do you guys get the visibility from the brands to understand the broader campaign to then say, oh, I can give you a more helpful recommendation because of what you've just given me on the wider mix that they're offering, or how does that?
Yeah, oftentimes we don't get that sort of visibility, which can be a challenge. But when we do, it can be quite magical. We have been pushing really heavy. Like, we have a creative studios team, so we've been pushing brands to really meet in advance with us to discuss the channel and like how they're thinking through their brand and where they're investing and how they can go big and out of home and really do it so that there's like a full 360 in the approach in terms of how messaging really shows up. I feel like there are a couple of questions in your question, and I don't know if I'm answering them at all. So
You're doing great.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you. So I think that it really does start at the beginning. Like, if you are considered an other, like we were talking about, oftentimes you just get like the brief and they ask you something very tactical and you just respond to it. But in order to like really elevate the type of content that you're displaying on our screens, having a conversation around like producing specifically for our platforms. Like, for example, like we have digital video screens on platforms in New York City subways. Like, how do you build assets for that specifically versus we have digital video screens inside the train cars now? Like, so that could be a dwell time of 20 minutes, for an individual. So how do you make that really rich, right? Versus, a billboard on the side of a highway. So like, again, it's like really, we really work hard to try and get ahead of it with brands.
So if the client could give you that greater visibility in what they're doing on the strategy side, what would that do how would you change your recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, we get it. We do get it a lot of times. Sometimes in a brief, sometimes it's, but a lot of times it happens a little bit, after the decision's been made of like what they're trying to go after. So a lot of what we'll do is we'll leverage data and we'll be able to try to tie what their creative messaging is to different audiences. So for us, it's the ability to leverage kind of the tools in our arsenal to be able to, like, our creativity a lot of times comes from the data and the channels that we're targeting in. Like, that's where we kind of get to put on our, kind of left brain, right brain type of solutions. So for us, we're not informing the creative a lot of times, but it's what kind of audiences and how niche can we find them or how can we expand them in ways that maybe other competitors aren't doing. And then I think it's trying to complement the overarching, the campaigns that are going on. So I think of an example where I used to work with, actually right here in Austin. Indeed, one of the clients we work with, and they do a great job at branding. They do a lot of everybody's seen their commercials. They're everywhere, right? But they also have done some stuff in the past where we've worked with Snapchat to create filters where you can use AI and see what you might look like as a nurse, as a doctor, as a construction worker. And those are really like immersive experiences where you can go in there and start to experience that brand and see what it might look like. And it's through sponsorship, and we use paid media to be able to get that words out there or get those type of campaigns out there. But for me, those are like the kind of things. But it all ladders up to, Indeed's message. We heard Jessica speak on Friday about we help people get jobs. Our role in that is to help get people jobs in very specific industries that we know are struggling at the time to be able to attract and retain talent in those spaces. So to me, that's where it really ladders in as a partner, and then we don't feel like another anymore. Now we feel like part of the story. And I think when brands let us in, that's when we do our best work.
Yeah, so on that point, because I think especially on out of home, I think people might just equate it to, I'm just wrapping a bus or I'm just taking a billboard. But you had a cool example of the Gorillaz, the band. Could you explain that? I thought that was interesting, of how they brought in an immersive experience into what people might perceive as, just a billboard.
Yeah, absolutely. So we worked with Google, who obviously, maps all the roads in the world, right? And they also are now doing it from a 3D perspective. So they're mapping all buildings. A little bit scary, but regardless, they worked in tandem with Gorillaz, who is like an AR musical band, for lack of a better.
That's what they're called, yeah, a band. We're in Austin, Val.
I'm
you know. Sorry,
I'm working with
It's a
about half a
band.
brain today, so I promise you I can speak better English normally. So in tandem with them, they created. You would go to a QR code on a billboard in Times Square, and they had all their fans. It was like a call to action to go to Times Square. So you clicked on the QR code, and from your phone, you were able to watch their new single, drop from their new album in Times Square. The band was larger than life. There were stages, and they were coming out from behind buildings. There were like AR helicopters flying around their heads, obviously filming them. And it was for fans. They have like a really strong fan base that are like diehards. It was just a really incredible experience. They were able to hear the single for the first time, and they were experiencing the band in Times Square live. So
yeah, that's cool. So for other brands in the room, like was that project, did that take a year to build out? Was that pretty quick to stand up? Just curious of the process.
I know, it was like about a 8 to 10 week process, so it happened really, really, really quickly. Yeah. Because
did you get any sense of the success of it or the?
No.
Cool, great. And then Bill, you also had a similar thing about not only purchasing, distribution across the various publishers and like the Hulus and the Rokus of the world, what your company does, but also even like video game placements, or maybe even the idea of placements within live stream shows that are dynamically placed in the billboard that is, in the Better Call Saul new episode, things like this.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's pretty amazing about the space is you can, we were talking about it a little bit ago, we've got partners out there that are in there and they're mapping streaming shows. So once they air the first time, then they sit on these servers waiting to get streamed again. It's probably how most of us watch shows. Well, they go in and they create partnerships with these different networks. So if you're watching Better Call Saul, you're watching CSIs, you can go in there and as you're streaming these videos, depending on what audience you fit in and depending on what the targeting is, the building in the background might be a Potbelly's, or maybe it's an LL Bean, or maybe the billboard is American Express. And these are all things that through AI and through the different powers of technology, they map these shows, and then the experience changes for each person. So I think that's where kind of it gets really exciting for brands, is being able to look at not just the initial upfronts of buying the linear TV, but then afterwards, how do I start to really buy my audiences that I care about in a way that's meaningful. And then on the flip, it's also a thing for the publishers where they're starting to be able to monetize their assets in different ways as well. I think it's really new and it's really scary for a lot of brands, but the tech's there, and I think now it's just a time of having comfort level and being able to adopt these types of these new solutions come forward, and I think it's going to really help with just the proliferation of ads, but in an authentic way where it's not hitting you in the face and it's not I'm going to stop this video here and make you watch 2 minutes in ads. The actual ads are just in the show themselves.
So, like, for your launch that happened a couple weeks ago, were you creating a situation where you were doing a slow rollout, or were you going really big with it? And like, can you talk about what your approach was to?
Yeah, to get it out first, it was primarily more of like on a communication side, on the PR front, to push it out first.
And even any paid media and
we didn't
such
put any
that.
paid behind it at first.
Okay.
There's the strategy to build that out, and then moving forward, there's going to be, MX takes always a focus on its like large national scale campaigns every year. So we had some priorities this year, and moving forward, I think it'll become more of the focus.
Right.
But it was more to get it out there and drive awareness because, again, so few people even know we have business cards, let alone cash flow tools for small businesses. And so it's just
So
to
you
begin.
went to the press?
Yeah, just to begin. Yeah,
Okay.
That was the first initial strategy.
Okay.
So I had a question for both of you on this: is do you feel that maybe more interesting for you, Bill, but I'm sure you have an opinion? Is do you feel like brands take full is your technology the ability of what it can do in terms of storytelling and the capacity to like target all the audiences, and like do brands take full advantage of what you're able to do, or are there hurdles or dependencies or things that prevent what you think could be the best?
I definitely have.
I mean, budget is a word that I'm sure at first came to mind, but I'm just more curious if do you feel how well are we doing to actually execute?
Yeah, I think it comes in pockets. Like, I think part of it comes back to just being brought up to the higher up in the story and what you're trying to achieve, because we've got all the tools in the toolbox and then some. So to answer your question, are they taking full advantage? No. I think the blockers to taking advantage of that is just we work with a lot of large organizations, and there's different. I mean, we're still operating in silos. We're still operating in these different worlds where we would love to move. We can move as fast as the brand wants to go. I mean, we can literally take a creative asset and one asset turn into 1,000 different assets and get it out in front of tens of millions of people within pretty quick amount of time. But to get sign off from a brand like American Express to do something like that would scare you, right?
So simple. It takes a day,
simple.
one day.
Yeah. That's the blockers. It's how do we get through some of the historical ways that things have been done and allow us to move fast and be able to do like right time marketing and personalization and audience targeting. And now where we thought we were starting to make traction, now we're actually the audiences are getting harder to do because all the privacy laws and as things come into play, actually we're getting further away from what was the ability to like bid one-to-one. Now we're going more to like contextually relevant solutions, looking at where audiences are at in the journey versus just by what activities they might be doing or what they're reading or what they're consuming. That's kind of where we're going. So it's shifting away from like one-to-one personalization to more mass personalization. So I think that's another thing that that's preventing us from maybe totally leveraging the power of our ad tech ecosystem that we have at Tremor. So.
Yeah, I go back to this one example. We were talking to a battery company, and we have this like predictive weather API that allows you to say like in 5 days there's going to be a hurricane in this like specific geo, for example. And so we were like, let's push like billboard messaging to like buy batteries now ahead of the hurricane, right? And they're like, oh wait, we're doing that on social, and they just had no idea or even a thought that like out of home could be built into the plan as well. So I just think it's like this constant need for education, and unfortunately like a lot of these brand marketers and agencies are just getting like pummeled with so much new information and new products and new offerings from so many different publishers that it's got to be a challenging job to manage that.
And even on that, I mean, we're here on a panel about storytelling. Do you think we do a good job of storytelling, or are we just message pushing?
I mean, in
giggles.
I mean, I think there's some people that tell a story really, really well. So like we cannot like ignore those brands that are just killing it from that perspective. And I think we all get super excited about those types of brands. I think there's a lot of and I think that's why I think the pendulum is sort of swimming, because it's kind of swinging to the opposite end now, because everyone went so heavy on performance, and I think there's now sort of a transition period to like what does our brand stand for and what is that voice and.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think a lot of it we at least at this conference, and maybe it's just the dynamic and the people that are here, and it's very biased folks that show up to Brand Innovators, but a lot of the brands that inspire me are the ones that are mission driven, like with purpose, and trying to not just push messaging, but change perception around what they're doing as a company.
I love the Jack in the Box where he's like, everyone orders late night, like it's total stoner food, and like they lean into that, and like I respect that heavily. Like, I mean, that's their purpose, is to deliver food to people who are really, really hungry, and it's like.
I thought you were going to say really, really high. Then took a turn.
Yeah, thanks.
So to that point about how can we be better storytellers, and we have this arsenal of new tools. We have QR codes in Times Square to watch a concert. We have placements in video game billboards, and those audiences will be different. Your person, people are going to be buying different things, and the text and the context and the placement's not always going to be relevant. So we were chatting about this idea of sort of clustering channels where, perhaps you have an ad in a billboard that is kind of sort of leads into something, but then that placement also appears in, because there's technologies out there now where you can have very dynamic ad placements on the apps that somebody has on their phone. And so, if they have Twitch and other things, maybe that same ad is being placed, but there's more context there. Then we're also watching, the latest Last of Us, and an interstitial comes in between, and they see a much more longer form story, but the same thread throughout. But that's just for a very specific audience. You can do that in other places where you're clustering channels. Do you feel like there's space for that? That's an opportunity for brands? Thoughts on that?
Oh, I mean, absolutely a space for it. I mean, and we're seeing it, we're feeling it in every which way. So I think the storytelling, where my mind is shifting, and what I'm hearing from brands a little bit, it's gone less of again, coming back to the consumer journey of where it was, it used to be like, what was the last message they saw? What's the next message they should see? How do we move them down the funnel? How do we get them to convert? How do we get new people into the funnel? How do we get people, back into the funnel in different ways? Like that's how it's been for a very long time. But I think now, to your point, it is more about storytelling, and it is just being able to avocados from Mexico, seeing a little clip online, but then seeing the full story come to life around what they're doing from a Super Bowl ad, and then being able to build on that or do the takeover in Times Square. I mean, I'll be honest, up until maybe 3 months ago, I never thought about avocados. I just liked them on my tacos. But now there's a brand behind that, and I think they're doing a great job of storytelling, and it comes with purpose, and I'm willing to venture that all of their partners understand that purpose and the story they're trying to tell and what they're trying to do to change perception out there. And so I think there is absolutely room for it, but it's shifting the way that we've historically done it.
I mean, I think the avocados of Mexico is a perfect example of, like, I live in New York. My avocados are always black on the inside when I open them. And that color that she depicted up there on the PowerPoint was absolutely like heaven to me. And like in an ideal world, opening that avocado and seeing that color, it's like, oh my gosh. So like my point being, it's, I think ultimately the end user and like what the end user wants is what the goal is, right? Like you want to create a story and tell your brand story in a really meaningful way that like speaks to whoever you're speaking to. So it's complicated. I think it's like super complicated. Like, I'm not going to tell you my age. I look really good for my age, but, but like targeting me versus my 12-year-old son who has literally, I don't think he's ever turned on the television, ever. Maybe to play PlayStation. But like, that is a really different approach and understanding that versus, me. Like, and we could be being sold the same product, like toothpaste or I don't know, whatever it is, So I think this job is harder than ever.
Yeah. I mean, so okay, on the brand side, let's talk about measurement for a bit, because the reality is, if I'm getting pitched, hey, put an ad in a video game's billboard, or hey, we're going to put a VR experience on a billboard, I'm like, am I?
Like 2 people clicked on it.
Right, yes. Yeah. And so, like, let's talk a bit about measurement. How are you all, make it make sense, I guess, and like, does it really justify the budget yet? And I think that's the tug and pull of this, is that we have goals, we have budget, and am I really going to invest it in, ads in video games? I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about MMM, and out of home doesn't always show very well in those models, which is a huge challenge for us. But from a measurement standpoint, I think, obviously, from mobile ID device collection, pass back, and matching back to other channels to understand how search was lifted or how so it drove like social searches or what have you, is something we're really focused on, is understanding how like we become closer to the omni-channel versus being like siloed out and just measured for branding, because that's what everybody does with us. They're like, oh, we'll just do like an M4 like panels survey to see if like Coke had brand consideration lift or like brand awareness lift. I mean, it's like kind of ridiculous, like the studies that we often do. So I do implore any marketer to like really think through, how are you measuring the effectiveness of the full omni-channel in an important way.
You had an interesting how you guys are helping define that better. It wasn't geofencing. You had another geometrical term for it.
It's like a polygon.
There you go. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we had a bunch of engineers go identify all of our out-of-home screens and actually create a special, unique polygon for each of the screens to display potential for viewability. So it's not like a full radius or even a half moon radius, which would really water down the collection of mobile ID, device IDs, because many of those people may have not actually been able to see the board. So we created these polygons, and it's pretty impressive.
But it was part of like a pharma campaign, and you were able to track
that
lift.
one. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. So we collected mobile IDs.
Really giving you, I'm trying to give you some things here, Val.
I'm sorry. Oh my God, you are a true friend, and we just met an hour ago. So we collected the mobile device IDs. We sent them over to Crossix, which are the third party for like the pharma, and they understand script information, and they have all this. It's kind of terrifying, actually. They have like a lot of really rich data on everyone. And so we sent those mobile IDs back to them. They matched them back to their whole grid of, script information on individuals. And then they were actually able to show from the out-of-home campaign, they were able to go directly to script lift and understanding how that worked. And I think that is something that most people wouldn't understand, that out-of-home has the ability to like drive scripts. But we can. But we've just never been measured that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think we sit in a little bit of a different spot with the measurement side. So we'll run cross-channel campaigns for brands across display, programmatic, anywhere biddable we can run. And so what we do like to do, and I think is really important, and to your question around how do I justify putting ads in video games, to me it's just part of innovation and test and learn, right? You don't know how it's going to work till you run it. And so you don't have to put a lot of budget in there. You know what your KPIs already are across more mature channels. But we can still measure it the same way. So you can still look at whether it's conversions, lift, exposure, whatever the main KPIs are. It's just the scale is going to be a lot smaller. But then you're learning and figuring that out. And maybe it's a good investment, maybe it's not. But in the scheme of it, it's probably not a really small amount of money that you're carving off from something that you already know works. And so that's where I think brands also can lean in a little bit to testing these different partners, and then working with somebody, even like in the example of like the device IDs, that could be fed into like work that we're already doing, where we're able to do foot study. Like we're doing local activations around digital. There's activations here in South by. We're all getting ads for that. Hopefully the people that are running those ads are also doing foot studies around them and seeing where people are going and are they actually taking action and what are they doing. So measurement it's getting harder because of all the laws and rules, but at the same point, there's ways to do it. And I think it's just as brands, it's just trying to continue to understand and do some trial and error to see what is and isn't working. And then when the CMO asks why we're doing ads in video games, you have an answer because it doesn't work.
We have a couple more minutes. Should we do audience Q&A or?
Oh, there's someone with a question.
Anybody with a question?
Yeah, right here.
Oh, yeah, hey.
So my question is for Val. Freddie Georges with FGPG Foundry, CEO of Live Experiential. And
Nice to meet you.
I'm super interested in anamorphic billboards.
Ah,
I'm
yeah.
dying to know what your take is. And
Yeah.
are your clients loving them? Are they too expensive? And what's the ROI on them?
Yeah.
One second. So she asked about anamorphic billboards, and is it working? Do clients love it? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, because I love that. We have like 6 screens in both New York and LA that we are capable of doing anamorphic on, or we deemed them, great for that. We had our creative studios team go out to the site and specifically look at the best dimensions, like set up the specs entirely perfectly so that when you create for it and build it out, it shows perfectly on the screen and looks 3D. So we started doing that. We started delivering specs to creative teams, about a year ago on this. And, Hulu, for example, did one. And then literally, I think the creative team is just so amped up about it that literally every new show that they come out with, they do a 3D anamorphic design, and they've gotten so good with it. And it's really been nice to see the evolution of how brands are leaning into it and building really beautiful designs based on that. So it's really, really easy to do. And from a cost perspective, it's not cheap. It's not. It is costly, but at the same time, people are taking pictures of it. People are posting it to social. I think the virality factor online from those types of stunts, for lack of a better word, I think measures up to an effective use of the channel in my mind. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Yes, sir. You can speak up. I'll repeat it.
And basically just want the tactical and the execution. And some will give you a really vague brief and just say, help us out, what's the content strategy? How do you kind of balance that? And if they're really not taking your advice sometimes, how do you kind of tactfully still provide recommendations?
So the question, if I can paraphrase, is how do you manage or balance very ambiguous clients that have very brief briefs and kind of just want a recommendation, but they don't like the recommendation at the end of the day, versus those that are very tactical and know exactly what they want. They just want to get something done.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, what we'll do a lot of times is if we can't get, through discovering questions, if not giving the answer, it's kind of breaking the rules a little, to be honest. So yes, I'm going to give you what you want in the brief and what you asked for, but I'm going to give you something more. I'm going to give you my perspective, and I think it's the only way to get out of the other is to be able to say, I know you think of us as, you've put us in this box, and you think we can do this for your brand, we're going to do it, we're going to crush it. But oh, by the way, we work with other brands that are doing stuff similar to this, and this is what they do, or this is how we can help elevate what you're already doing, and maybe you haven't thought about this. If you have, great. If you haven't, also great. Let's chat more about it. So I think for me, it's just that consultative approach of being able, and that's how you build trust as well. It's just showing them what else is out there and helping think for them, because I think in fairness, brands do have a lot going on. I don't think they're being specifically trying to put you in the other. They're just trying to get their job done too. So I feel like if you're able to offer that perspective, it goes a long way with brands.
Yeah, I mean, I do think having an actual conversation once receiving a brief is so imperative, especially if it's ambiguous. I think, having that's why, like earlier, I was talking about how we have our creative teams speak to brands as often as possible, because it just opens up so many doors and so many new ways to think through how they can approach the channel that they're considering investing in. So I think a conversation is you have to get face-to-face time with them. Yeah.
All right.
Are we done?
We do it? We made it?
Oh, my mic. There we go. Oh, sorry.
I thought
Okay.
no one was going to be sitting here, so thank you everyone for.
Yeah, this is great. Y'all look great.
This was terrific. You guys stuck the landing, the very difficult reverse panel. Thank you so much. Do not try this at home, for professionals only. Please feel free to use the stairs.